Hello everybody, welcome to Roman Just Codes. I am Roman, and in this episode we will dive right into the heart of Riverpod, and we will learn how to effortlessly update our UIs in response to state changes. Say goodbye to clunky rebuilds and hello to seamless reactivity. We will explore how to create state providers, how to listen for changes, and trigger UI rebuilds with surgical precision. Get ready to build Flutter applications that are dynamic, reactive, responsive, and a delight to use. Now, if you end up liking this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any future Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get right to it. So this is where we left off last time. We were able to install Riverpod. We set up the build runner, so it's running in the background. It's generating code for us. And I set up the first provider that upon you clicking on it, like it updates its state, and then you could see the UI rebuilding and listening for changes on that. So that was pretty simple, but at least this should be like a good foundation for it. Now let's continue building our application. So remember, this is what we discussed that we will be building throughout this video series. I'm going to pay homage to my home country of Dominican Republic. We'll be building an interactive map. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to already export all the images and I'll prep them so that we can bring them into our application. And the gist of the application is we're going to be able to toggle on and off some of those features to highlight certain features of the map, like showing the labels, like showing the rivers, showing the lakes, switching from Spanish to English, switching from light mode to dark mode, and also toggling the provinces, showing them on and off, and as well as showing like the regions and whatnot. So you're going to learn about my country a little bit. You're going to see how cool we're going to make it into, like a full-blown application as we make progress building it. So if you see right here, I'm just going to export each one of these images right here. So as I select that, right here you will see like some of the content, like the labels, the borders. You see like all those images. I'm going to export them and we're going to bring them into our application. So if you see right here, I already have all the SVGs already generated, ready to be imported into my application. Every SVG representing each one of the provinces, and then we're going to be able to toggle those as well as some of the islands around it. So I have everything set up. So this is pretty much as far as like assets goes that we're going to be importing into our application that we're gonna need. So why don't I do that? So in my project, remember, this is where we left off. So what I'm going to start creating is I'm going to create a folder that I'm going to call assets. And then I'm just going to drag those assets right in there. So I have my SVGs. I'm going to drag them into my assets folder right there. So I have the assets folder. So if you see, I already have the map assets and I have all my provinces. We're going to be adding some other assets as well. But for now, we should be good. All I need to do is now go to the pubspec.yaml and define that as part of the assets that will be imported into our project. So in the pubspec.yaml, I'm going to type assets. And here they are. For now, I'm going to be consuming some of these assets. I'll probably just bring one more just to test that everything is all good. So I'm just going to use like a default one for showing just the map, just to see that everything is well and working. So I'm going to bring one, if you see right here, I'm just going to bring like the whole map just to see that everything is loading fine. So I'm going to try to load it and make sure that everything is well. So with that, I'm going to start defining a little bit of the structure as well. So I have for example, like the main application. I'm not going to need some of these providers anymore. So I'm going to delete those. I'm going to get rid of that. My material application should just be wrapping the main application, like the main wrapper application, if you see. It's pretty much just like wrapping the main application right here. I just called it DR main app, but then I'll have, for example, like another one that is the actual map application that kind of covers the whole thing. It's just going to be probably like one single page. So let's keep it as simple as that. So I'm going to remove this scaffold from here because I'm not going to need it. Of course, I'll delete some of these Riverpod providers. You already know how it works. So I'm going to create another one. I'm going to call it DR map app. Right now I have the main application called DR main app, but then I'll have one called DR map app, for example. In this case, I'm going to create like a folder called pages, and this is where I'm going to have my pages. For now, we're only going to have one, but let's keep it simple. So I'm just going to create a page called DR map.dart. And here is where I'm going to create like a stateless widget called DR map app. It's going to be basic for now. just so that it could be like a placeholder. That way I can import it like this. There it is. And then now, for example, I'm gonna remove the debug show checked mode banner, of course. I'm going to later, we're going to be dealing with, for example, like adding localization whenever we get to that point. We're going to be adding theming and whatnot. But for now, let's just keep it simple. Let's make sure that I'm not going to need this file either. So I'm going to delete it, and we're going to be generating some more proper files. So in my particular case, I don't need any of this like at this point. I'm just going to keep it very simple. Let's reload our application. Let's make sure that, see, right now it's empty because this application is not returning anything at all. So, but here is where I'm going to add the rest of the components, okay? So why don't we start real quick and let's see that everything is working well. So I'm going to add a scaffold. I'm going to add a body to it with a center widget. So I want to show the SVG image that represents the map. Let's just start with something like that. I want to show that image, this SVG. So for that, we're going to need to install the Flutter SVG package. I'm going to install it right away. I'm going to open another terminal and I'm going to say Flutter pub add Flutter SVG. So we're going to keep it simple. Just load it, install it. Now I'm going to just say SVG picture.asset, and then I know that my assets are in assets, SVGs, and then I believe the file is called rd.svg. Just gonna keep it simple. Let's just let's just load it as is, and let's see. For example, of course, I need to kill the application so that it picks up the new file and the new configuration that I just did. So I'm just gonna reload it, and then let's see how it pops up. And there it is. It just shows in there. It just shrinks a little bit. I would love for it to be like interactive so we could do that, but let's take it one step at a time. Right now, what I'm doing is just making sure that the SVG package is loaded and is all well and dandy. It's just showing the map. But now I want to bring all those images and overlay them on top of each other. Why don't we do that? So that's exactly what we're going to focus on now. So now that I know that my map is loading correctly, so now let's start actually loading some of the actual assets. So instead of doing this, I'm gonna remove this. I'm gonna remove this image, and I'm gonna add instead a stack. So a stack will be, because remember, we're going to be overlaying some of these images. And if you saw in the Figma design file, we're able to overlay each one on top of each other, and then it looks as the whole composite image. So that's kind of like a trick that I'm using to make it look like it's a single image, although I'm able to control each individual layer by programmatically turning it on or off, or even changing colors and whatnot. So you'll see that in a minute. But for now, I'm going to be using, for example, like some of the existing assets in there. So I'm going to use a stack. I'm going to start adding some of the children, some of these images. If you see here, I'm going to add some of the basic assets for the map. In this particular case, I'm going to do like SVG picture. I'll do that asset, and then I'm going to add some of the assets in here. I have the one, for example, like map assets. And I'm going to be adding, let's say, the base Dominican Republic asset. So let's just load it, and let's see if it still works. For now, it should just load regular. See, you can see right there's very a low color in there. So I'm gonna start adding like a background color to the scaffold. That way, for example, this is some of the colors that I picked up from here from the Figma. So don't worry about that. And then if I reload it, now you should be able to see the map in there. Now let's continue overlaying some of those other images on top of it, right? So that's pretty much what you want to do. You want to bring it all and kind of like add them all in there, right? So let's try to do that. But instead of adding them directly to the map, why don't we do this? I'm actually going to keep the stack, that's okay, but I'm going to create another widget that just encompasses the map itself. So in this case, I'm going to create a folder called widgets. Remember, for example, depending on your architecture, you can organize the folder structure as you see fit. This is a particularly simple application, so I'm going to keep it very flat, very not too nested. So I'm going to create a widgets folder, and then inside of it, I'm going to create one called dr map just for the map. It's just going to encompass all the images. It's going to be listening to changes on those items to be selected or highlighted only pertaining to the map. So it encapsulates only the map widget. So I'm going to call it dr map. I'm going to also make it a stateless widget for now. I'll call it dr map, just that. And of course, here is where I'm going to add my stack, and I'll have like all those images in there. Here, I'm not going to add the background. The background is going to be added here. And then the stack is actually going to be overlaying, like I showed you, is going to be, for example, overlaying some of these items. They're going to be overlapping. So you have the map, you have some of those components, left, right, bottom, on the bottom left side. So everything is going to be within a stack. But the map itself is composed of a stack of images, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. So I added that. Now let's import the map inside of our application right here. So instead of doing this, I'm going to do dr map, just the map. And there it is. Now let's rebuild. I can get rid of this one from here unless I need it later. I'm going to save that. Let me just paste, or actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my SVG again right here inside of the map. I'll do SV picture, that asset, because we're going to be loading all the assets. And just like before, I'll do assets, SVGs, map, assets. I think I called it base rd.svg. Let me make sure that I am doing it correctly. So assets, map, assets, base rd. And then if I close right here, save and reload. Okay, so there it is. That's good. Now let's continue adding some of those other items. So I'm going to try adding some of the other ones, such as the islands. If you see in the map, like the islands are, they're part of the region, but they're not part of the province itself. They're part of the whole island. So I'm just going to add those in there. Add, for example, like the lines, the rivers, the lakes, the borders. Those are things that don't depend directly on each individual asset pertaining to the provinces. So let's try to bring those in and let's see how that works. So I'm just going to copy paste some of these, and I'll say one of the islands. And I'm going to add some of the other ones as well. Later, we will add more stuff to it. We will modify them because we also want them to be part of the whole. We want them to be part of the application's theme and change their colors accordingly. So let's see if they're overlapping correctly, because this depends a lot on how I created those images, how I assembled them, how I prepped them, so I can bring them into the application. So if I reload, you still can't see anything. Oh, actually, I need to kill the application, of course. Start it again. And then now we should be able to pick some of those up. I should just fix, of course, where these come from. These are coming from the provinces. So I'll replace this by provinces. So I can just do this. And now they should be coming from there. Now, if you see, the islands are there. And then now I can start adding some of those other pieces. But instead of hard coding the elements, why don't we programmatically try to add them? That way, we can start getting involved into how we're consuming some of these images in a programmatic way defined by providers available in our application. So why don't we start doing that? So the first thing that I'm going to do is I will create within my libs folder, I'm going to create a subfolder called models. And this is where we're going to be creating some of those models. Later on, we're going to be talking about freeze, how we're going to create these models that will engage in the whole state management architecture and, the whole strategy that we're going to be planning to update the information, the state of the application. But first, I'm going to create a file just called enums.dart. This is where I'm going to be creating the enumerations that will play a role in this application. I'll create a new enum called enum map assets. And the map assets, like you saw in the Figma, are mainly the stuff that is on the left-hand side, like showing the sea, the name of the labels, the coastal lines, rivers, lakes, borders, etc. So those are the map assets, right? I'm calling it that. So I'm actually defining them as an enumeration of values that then we're going to programmatically use them to render the particular images associated with them. So why don't we do that? For example, here I'm going to add one for seas, coastal line, one for, again, rivers, lakes, right? And I'm going to add one for borders and for names, like the labels, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this enumeration into a provider. That way we can query it from anywhere and consume it in a more comprehensive, in a more streamlined way. So with my map assets enumeration created, now I'm going to create a provider that provides these values, and then I can consume them inside of my map. So what I'm going to do is within the lib folder, I'm going to create a subfolder called providers. You can keep your organization as you see fit. For now, I'm going to create just a single file where I'm going to put all my providers. Remember, this is a small application, so you should be able to divide your providers per feature. But in this particular case, I'm just going to keep them all in the same one. So I'm just going to call it map providers.dart. And here is where I'm going to create like all the providers that the application requires. So I need a provider to wrap the map assets. That way, from any other widget, I want to pull them, I want to inject those values and render them accordingly and consume them accordingly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create I'm going to say Riverpod, and I'm going to create a class-based provider. So I'm going to call it selected map assets. For now, let's just bring them all as the default value. And if you see there, I'm getting assisted by the code. And here, for example, I'm just going to call it exactly selected map assets. It's gonna be a list of map assets as opposed to just a single one. So I'm gonna say list map assets. I override the build method. I will import the enums. And instead of just returning one, I'll actually return all of them. So as you see there, I'm bringing all of the values as the default representation of this provider. Of course, remember, you need to do a part, and then you have to bring, for example, the generated version of the map providers. The way that you say is you say map underscore providers. You use the name of the file, and then you do .g.dart. You should be able to import the rendered version, the build version of this provider. Let's make sure that the provider is correct. I'm going to kill it and try it one more time. I'm just going to hit the runner one more time. And of course, you need to bring the import that supports the Riverpod annotations. Never forget that. Then you see, you bring the annotation and then everything is all good. So now you should be able to consume this provider anywhere within your application in a very simple way. So you see, this is called selected map assets. Now we should be able to pull all of this. Remember, I named the assets specifically so that it maps each one of these map assets. The way I can pull them in a corresponding fashion. For example, here, of course, I have like the English version and the Spanish version. We're going to focus on the English version first. And then when we tackle localization, we'll pull the other ones accordingly based on the locale. But for now, we're going to focus on pulling all the maps assets in a programmatic way and then render those in the map. So now that I'm here in the map, now I can just add those. For example, in this particular case, how do I have access to the ref? That way I can inject the dependency that I need. In this particular case, I need the map assets. So instead, I convert this widget as a consumer widget, of course. Then I inject the widget ref inside of the build method. And then right from in here, I can say final selected map assets. Sorry. And then, of course, you know, there's called selected map assets provider. There's already a provider generated for me, so I can just consume it in a very simple way. So right now, if I just reload, of course, you won't see anything. You still see the core underlying images, but I want to show those assets on top of all of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say list.generate. I'm going to grab all of my assets. I'm going to say selected map assets.length. And I am going to iterate over those enumerations in order to display the images accordingly. Right here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to return, just like that. I'm going to say return SVG picture dot asset. And then the assets will be exactly this. So it will be the map assets, selected assets.index, and then SVG. Depending on, let's say, for example, which one is. Only two assets from here are localizable, which are the names and the Cs. So I could just keep it really simple, and I'm going to say asset name. And then I do, if the asset, for example, like this is just the asset, right? And then if I say, I'll say asset, and then here asset name. And then I say if the asset is either the map assets, for example, if I say if it's either the C's or the asset is the the names. So I'll say map assets dot names. Then I'm going to use this like interpolation of the name. So I'll say asset that name and then underscore English, because I'm going to be using the English. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the asset that name straight up, just like that. And then all I need to do here, instead of using that, I'll just use the asset name, just like it comes out. But then remember, you cannot just add a list like that. You have to deconstruct the list. So I do the ... syntax. That way I can pull the list and then just deconstruct the items, and they will be rendered on top of the core images that I already have. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to reload. And now you should be able to see all those images in there. You see, now it looks like the complete full image, but they're actually overlaid on top of each other. And as you see, you get the full picture. Now you should be able to proceed and now show, for example, the images of the provinces. Right now, we're not showing them, but you want to show them, for example, maybe adding a particular color or something like that. Now let's try to load some of those. But at least I just wanted to show you that right now we are consuming the provider from this specific widget, and you saw how simple it was. I was able to create an enumeration that represents all the map assets, and then you're able to see them by just programmatically render them based on the name. And then I'm using this nomenclature where I named every image using an enum, like an enum approach. I just looped through all the map assets. I could have even looped through all the values in the enumeration and then just display them. But this way, at least you were able to see them all in a very streamlined fashion, as you can see right here. Now I believe we're ready to start showing the provinces in there. Right now, they're not be rendered. It's just the names and the borders and whatnot. But now we want to pull that information. So how are we going to do it? So I already have an API, a public API that I'm going to be consuming, which is amazing. It gives you like all the information from the Dominican Republic. It gives you the regions. It gives you the provinces. It gives you the municipalities. It gives you a lot of stuff. So let me show you right now. So this is the API I was referring to. It's called, it's part of it's a Dominican portal with a bunch of free APIs. This one gives you like all the documentation about information about the Dominican Republic. You just, for example, if you just grab this URL right here, it gives you, for example, like all the regions, or it gives you all the provinces and all the municipalities. So if you grab this URL, http api digital.gov.do, for example, I'm going to test it using, let's say I can use either my browser, I can just drop it right here. And if you see that, you get like all the regions. The one that we're going to be consuming is the provinces. If you type on provinces, you get every single province in the Dominican Republic. This is a public API that you can use. So this is pretty cool. You can use it yourself. And this is exactly what I'm going to be using. So instead of me hitting the endpoint right now, we're going to be doing it in a later video. I'm just going to grab all the values from here and I'm going to hard code them for now. So that way you can just, we can populate and start kind of like mocking some of those. But in a way, later we're going to be dealing also with the proper way of mocking it. But for now, let's keep it really simple. So I'm going to be creating a model or a data class that represents each province. So if you see, every province has a name, a code, an identifier, in a region code. All of them are strings. And for that, we're going to be bringing some of the aspects that I told you about. There's a package called Freeze. So again, Freeze is a Flutter package that takes the hassle out of creating data models. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So instead of writing, tons of repetitive code for constructors, equality checks, copying, JSON handling, we're going to be doing that through Freeze. The cool thing about it is that Freeze generates all of that for you automatically. This means that less time spent on tedious tasks and more time focused on building awesome application features. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing here. I'm going to install that package and then I'm going to grab this code in just a minute, and then we're going to consume it in our application. So let's start with that. So what I'm going to do is inside of our models folder right here, I'm going to add another model. In this particular case, I want the one for the province, like each individual province. So I'm going to add my one file, and I'm going to call it province.dart. And here is where I'm going to be creating that model. First, I need to make sure that I have the Freeze package. And I don't know if I showed you the documentation. This is the documentation for Freeze, and you need to make sure to add the corresponding dependencies. For example, you could go to the example and you can see what Freeze requires. So you need to, of course, install it first. I'm going to do Flutter pub add Freeze. And then when you add freeze, it gets added, but you need to also add the def dependencies, of course, and you need to make sure to add, if you want to convert to JSON, so you want to do the also install the serializable package. So those are some of the dependencies that you may need for your app, for this particular application, and if you want to use freeze in a more comprehensive fashion. So you want to add Flutter pub add freezed annotation, and also the JSON serializable. So I'm gonna add those two dependencies. Perfect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a class called province, and then it's not just gonna be a regular class. This class, you have to decorate it with the freezed decoration, of course. You also need to add two generated files. You need to add two part files. You have to add the, make sure that you follow the name of the file. This one is called province.dart. So I'll say province.freeze.dart, and you do the part province.g.dart, because this is the generated portion of it. And then if you save, now you should continue to do province with underscore province. It's very similar to the Riverpod when you create like a Riverpod class-based provider. In this particular case, you need to create a const factory. And then inside of that factory, you had the required fields. In my particular case, I have 4 required fields. In my province, I have 4 required fields. One is called name. The other one is called code. The next one is called identifier. I'm trying to make it match the API so that it is more streamlined. So it's name, code, identifier, and region code. That way it maps straight up. And the last but not least is, I'll do string region code. After you do that, then you say equals underscore province. And then you have to, and then of course it creates that from JSON factory method for converting from a JSON, then populates this data model. I just need to add the word province right here, and then that's it. Perfect. So now it should be rebuilding. And the cool thing about this, of course, remember, do not modify the generated code. But if you see it, for example, if you see this particular code, it actually generates the to JSON, the from JSON. It creates all of that for you, creates the copy. It creates some of that boilerplate code that is very tedious to do by hand, but Freeze actually is there for that, to actually assist with the code generation. So that's pretty cool. So with that in place, I should be able now to create a provider for this particular data model. That way I can consume all the provinces straight from my API. I'm not going to use the API right now. Like I said, I'm going to hard code it, but at this particular point, I'm going to create a provider that gives those to me, and then I should be able to just consume them internally. Simple as that. So I'm going to create like the list of, let's say, selected provinces, and all of them will be, let's say, rendered and assembled inside of a list. That way I can read them inside of the map and then show all the provinces right there. Why don't we do that? So for now, I'm going to go to the providers, and then right here in the providers, I'm going to create, see, I already have my first provider. I'm going to create one called provinces list. I'm going to create the list of provinces now by creating the decorator for Riverpod. And then now I'm going to create my class called provinces list. And of course, you have to say extends provinces. You see, like it helps me out a little bit. It's going to be a list of province, the type of data model that I created earlier. And then eventually I'm going to create one like, update provinces that will require a list of province. And then this will update, for example, my state accordingly. Let's say if I'm going to add, instead of, in this particular case, this is the trick of when you update, let's say, a provider that is based on a list. Instead of just reassigning the instance like that, instead of reassigning the state, which is the list of provinces, you actually have to decompose the list and kind of like recreate a new instance. In this case, the way that you do it, you would do it like this. and then you deconstruct the provinces by creating a new instance. It's like creating a new reference, another list, like a copy of that list. It has to be immutable. You cannot mutate the same list. You actually have to recreate it and repoint it to a new to another reference. So in this particular case, that should do. But remember what I said, I'm going to consume the provinces list as a hard-coded list of provinces. But where do I get this list from? I need to get it from somewhere. So in this particular case, I need something that provides it to me, or to, the way that we can assemble it. And I'm going to grab, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab all of these right here, and then I'm going to just create a temporary provider that gives these to me. So look, I'm going to grab all of these, which is like a JSON, right? I'm going to create another provider. I'm going to call it Riverpod. And then I'm just going to call it a list of province, right? And then I'm just going to call it, for now, let's call it mocked provinces. Remember, when you create a functional based provider, you have to inject the references. And then here, what I'm going to return is that list of, for example, like this list of hard-coded values, hard-coded provinces, which later I'm going to pull from the API, but for now, I'm just going to get them synchronously from the application. So I'm just going to call it final all provinces as string. Here, I'm going to just create I'm going to paste my list of provinces. You see, it's just an array of provinces for now, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this into a JSON that then I can return out of this. So what I do is I will use JSON decode, of course. So say return JSON decode. I want to import data convert. So I do JSON decode. I pass the all provinces as string, and then I cast it as a list of dynamic. Then after I cast it as a list of dynamic, I'm already getting the IntelliSense help, which I'm going to map into an individual province from JSON. Remember that Freest already created that for me. So this is already created for me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to decode that list of provinces from a JSON string to a list of province instances, map each one to a province instance, and return it as a list out of this provider. And all I need to do is, for example, in this particular case, let me, of course, import Riverpod because I wanted to do that. And then now I'm going to return that. But look at this. And now what I'm going to do is consume this mocked provinces provider inside of the build method of this provinces list, and I'm going to inject it with a default list of provinces. For now, because I am a class-based provider, Riverpod already provides a reference through which I'm going to be able to locate another provider and pull the corresponding information. In my case, ref.read, because it's just going to be like one single read. It's not going to be updated or like something that will change. It's just going to be like a hard-coded initial list. So I'll say mocked provinces provider, and then that said, it should return the list of provinces. How do I know that this works? Now let's try. As you see, every province is a model that has a name, a code, identifier, and a region code. Look at the code. Every province has a code as a string, like as an integer, with a string representation. If you go to my provinces folder, you see that each one of those actually is mapped to the corresponding code representation that it has within its model. So I will be able to just loop through those, the list of provinces, grab the code property, and just render them programmatically inside of my map. So let's do the same thing. I have my provinces list provider. Let's see if I should be able to access them from inside of the map. So I'll go to my widgets, dr map, and right underneath here, I'll do exactly the same thing. I'm gonna, generate the list of provinces, and all I need to do is say I'll say all provinces ref.watch. I wanna start watching it from the get-go, and then I just say provinces list provider. I'll say provinces list provider, which is already created for me. And all of the provinces, I'll do exactly the same thing that I was doing with the map asset. So I'll deconstruct a list, I'll generate it on the fly based on the length of the provinces. I will just iterate over each one of them, and I will return, just like before, in an SVG image that represents each one of the provinces. So I will use the same approach. I will grab this, and if you see all the provinces, I can just say final province, and then I'll do all provinces index. I'll grab the one corresponding in the iteration, and then all I need to do here is I say provinces and just the code that corresponds to the image, which is in this particular case province.code. Just by doing this, it should work. I will reload the application right here, and then I'll see. You may not be seeing them, but let's try this so at least you can see. I'll check. I'll say that if for example, I'll apply a color filter to it, and I'll say color filter mode and change the color if the index is the first one. Let's see if the first one gets actually picked up. So for example, I'll say, of course, that blend mode source in. And then here, all I need to do is provide the color. So I'll say if the index is 0, then for example, just a color, say colors.red, otherwise, just for example, like colors.white, something like that. So if I reload it, you should be able to see that the first one is actually this, and it actually got the color because I'm actually programmatically loading those provinces in there. Why don't we try now another index, for example, like 20, something like that, just to see it. And then you see how, for example, like it gets rendered. So now what we're going to do, instead of doing it like this manually, let's actually build the list right here, the list that shows on the left hand side. I want to show this like in the center and make it like a little bit more interactive. I don't know if you guys have heard of the interactive viewer widget. We could use that one. You could use any other type of widget, but I want to make it really simple and really straightforward. So right now you see that, of course, you could stretch it, you could see it, but I would love, for example, like use the mouse wheel, and then I can just zoom in and out. That's something that comes out of the box if you use an interactive viewer from Flutter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the page, the original page. So this is my stack right here, which has the background like of the, the background of the page. But this, the map, I'm actually first going to wrap it inside of a center widget. And then if I reload it, you see that it's in the center. But if I move the mouse or the mouse wheel, nothing happens. I would love for it to be a little bit interactive. So instead, I'm going to wrap my DR map inside another widget, and this widget will be the interactive viewer widget. If you guys have used it before, it's pretty versatile, and it brings a lot of functionality right out of the box. For example, if I just reload it just as is, I can use the mouse wheel, and you can see that I can zoom in and out. So it's kind of behaving a little bit like a full-blown map, even though this is just a bunch of SVGs overlaid on top of each other. You see that the image is actually getting clipped. So instead, the way that you do is you can add this clip behavior and set it to clip.none. And what it does now, if you reload it and try to do the zooming in and out, is exactly what I want. You see one line of code, two lines of code, and I was able to make it very interactive using the interactive viewer. I love that. Now with this in place, now let's go and create the list of the map assets and how people can select them and how they can toggle them. So let's look at the design, at the Figma design that I have. And if you see here, this list will be, it will consist of just a list of labels. And we're just going to use the same map assets enumerations that we have in there to render these. We're going to be using like checkboxes to like toggle these on or off. I'm going to use just like a headline label, just like a text label up here. I'm going to surround it with a container with some margin, some padding, so that at least you could give it a little bit of that aesthetic. So let's try to do that. So we're going to create a separate widget that will encapsulate this functionality. So let's go back to our code, and then I'm going to create another widget. And in this case, we're going to call it map assets list. So I'm going to create a file. I'll call it map assets list.dart. We're going to, of course, create it initially as a stateless widget. We're going to call it map assets list. Let's import the corresponding dependencies. So that's all good. Here I can show you, for example, this is called map assets list, and where will we add it? So in this particular case, I want to add this, the map assets list. I'll probably add it maybe at the top left, just like in the design. So I'm going to go back to my, let me close all the other ones. So close all other widgets, and I'm going to go to this page. And if you see right there, it should be overlaid within this stack, but at the top left. So I'm going to use an align widget. I'm going to use the alignment, and then I'm going to say top left. And then that top left widget, then my child will be the map assets list. Now let's see what it looks like. If you just see, it says map assets list right here on the left hand side. So that's exactly where I want it positioned. And now I'm going to start building that widget right on that corner. So let's go back to my map assets list, and then I'm going to start fleshing it out. The first thing that I want to do is, for example, I can create like for my maps assets list, I can create like a container. So I can leverage this same container, and then I will add like some padding to it. So let's do like edge insets all. Let's do like 16 pixels all around it, and let's do also some margin around it, pretty much the same amount. Let's just keep it simple. So we'll add like padding and margin the same way. Let's add a fixed dimension for this component. You can make it flexible, but in this particular case, I want to keep it like 300 of width and 420 of height. Let's add the decoration like I mentioned. So we can add a box decoration. We'll add, for example, like the color. You can make it white. Let's start with that. Let's do colors that white. Later, we will refactor and change some of these colors and whatnot, and put it in a more common place, maybe inherited from the theme. For now, let's just flesh it out, and then we'll build it accordingly. So we'll add some border radius so that it looks a little better. And as the child, then here is where I'm actually going to be building and flesh out my list. So I'm going to start with a column. And then the column will have, let's add a text label. We'll call it like show, exactly like in our design. And then, for example, we can add some spacing in between. I can even do, for example, the new property in column, which is called spacing. So you can add 16 pixels of spacing between the text and whatever I'm going to place below. In this case, I'm going to add an expanded widget where I'm going to add, if you recall in the design, is actually this list. So it's going to take up most of the height in this widget. So we're going to wrap it inside of an expanded widget. So that expanded widget will have a child, right? And then I can even have, I can have a list view. I can actually make it into a list view. So I could do list view.builder. I can do list view.builder. I need, for example, to build this list out of something, I need to know what my count is. So what am I going to be using to feed this list view? And then, for example, what am I going to be using to feed this list view? I want to feed the list of map assets that are available for me through a provider. So the provider that is wrapping all the map assets, I should be able to consume it in here. How do I access that list of map assets? Remember, either you do it at the top up here, you make it into a consumer widget if you're going to be using it, or you can actually, for example, wrap this one only inside a consumer widget. That is another way to do it. So for example, I can wrap this widget inside of a consumer widget. Actually, the trick that I use, I don't know if you guys do it, I wrap it inside a builder, and then I rename it as a consumer. Then I add the ref and the child. The consumer is another one of those widgets available through Riverpod that you can use to localize and to centralize the way that a widget listens to notifications and listens to changes to its state. In this particular case, this consumer will be the only region within this widget that will rebuild if there's there's any change in, let's say, the selected the map assets. If I put it a little bit higher, the whole widget will rebuild. In this particular case, I just want to localize it to that list. I don't want this text to rebuild. I don't want none of these things to be rebuilt. So just the list of the assets. So in this particular case, I'm gonna also access all my map assets. So I'm gonna call it just like that, and I'll use the ref consumer widget. It's pretty similar to like a consumer stateless widget or a consumer widget, but this is just like a wrapper around, without you having to create a full-blown widget, you can, or a full-blown class. You just have to wrap your widget, the one that you want to listen to those changes and rebuild accordingly, wrap it around a consumer. So now is where I'm going to say, okay, so let's just wrap, let's say, all my selected. You want to listen to all the selected map assets. So remember, we have the selected map assets provider, but this only gives you the ones that are selected. You want to see the ones that are selected, but you want to also build it off of the original list. So where do you pull this list from? You could actually, in this particular case, use all the map assets. You could just say, final, or for example, you can just use the map assets original list, and you can just do it off of the enumeration right away. You don't have to create another provider unless you want to, but I'll just use the core original map assets values right out of the enumeration. Now the item builder will actually build off of that. I already have the map assets that are selected. I should call it selected map assets to make it more appropriate. And then what I'm going to do is this list view builder will actually, during the iteration, it will loop through all the my map assets values from the enumeration. So I'll call final map asset, and I'll just use map assets values, and then I'll just pull it out of the index. And then what I will do is I will return a checkbox list tile. I'll use the checkbox list tile is again pretty versatile as well, and you can use it to create like a list of checkboxes within a list. And then that's exactly how I'm going to populate it. So here I have the value, and the value should be whether in the current iteration, in the current value, the current map asset is contained within the selected map assets. So you can just say final asset value, and then here you can just say selected map assets contains map asset. What this will do is will actually return a value whether the corresponding map asset is actually selected out of the main list, and then you can just show it selected or not. So here I'll just show that the value is selected out of the list of map assets if it is if it's the corresponding one. Then later on, what I'm going to do is if the user selects it, or actually in this case, I want to add the title. So let's add a title, and the title could just be like a text label. And I'm just going to use the label or the corresponding value. I'm just going to use map asset, that name. This is the string representation of the enum. So it's going to give you that enum representation as a string, and then you can just show it right there. Now, when the user changes the checkbox, I want to trigger that change, and I want to either add or remove from that list of map assets, and then update the corresponding selected map assets collection. The way that I want to do it, the way that I want to toggle those is really simple. So I'm going to say if value, meaning if it's true, so I'm going to add to this selected map assets. I'm just going to add it to it. I'm going to say selected map assets that add because it's the corresponding one. So I'm going to say here if value, then just add it, else just remove it. Simple as that. And then what we're going to do once this collection has been updated with the value, the corresponding value, whether it was checked or unchecked, after that, you want to update the whole collection by saying ref.read the name selected, or you can actually go to the provider one, which is selected map assets provider. So I'm going to say selected map assets provider dot notifier dot update with this list, which is the selected map assets. And then in that way, what we're doing is we are going to update. Actually, I didn't create it. I want to update that collection, but the way that you do it, you want to update that provider, but the way that you do it, you can provide other methods that can update that provider. So let's go to that provider and add that, because I believe we're missing that. So in my map assets right here, I'm missing a method where I can say void update. Let's just call it like that, update, where you pass a list of map assets and then you update your collection accordingly based on the new incoming updated list. So now that we're back here, you do your selections, you update it by passing an updated version of that collection. And then let's see how that is looking. So I'm going to reload. Let's see what it's looking like. So far, so good. And then here you can just see all the values in the enumeration, and they're all selected because they're all available by default, right? So then you can just uncheck it, and then you see that right off the gate is immediately working, because what this is doing is actually notifying which out of the selected ones is actually available, and then the map is reading those values and is updating the widget accordingly. It's either rendering the images that are in the list according to the selected map assets, and the ones that are not, it just doesn't render those. So if you see there, now I'm able to just toggle all of these on or off, and it's working right off the gate. So I love the way that is coming out, and you saw how straightforward it was and how simple it was to implement. So now that this is implemented, actually, why don't I can just make some changes to this label right here. So for example, in my column, I'm going to make a cross-axis alignment of start. The text, I'm going to add maybe a style. I could use, for example, I can start using some of the theming. So I could do final text theme, and I can say theme dot of context. This is, instead of you hard coding your styles within a widget, you can just inherit it from the theme. Later, when we get to changing the application's theme, you'll be able to see that. So I'm going to just pull the text theme from it. And then I'm going to use, for example, I can just say style, text theme, and let's use a headline small for now. Let's see what it looks like. Right there. See, so it looks good. I can overwrite it. I can overwrite this one and say, for example, like copy with font weight dot bold, make it bold, for example. Just make it a little, so that it pops. And then if I reload it, you see now that it says like show, it shows all these values, and then I should be good with that. So you see the application is taking shape. I'm able to toggle the values exactly what I want. Now that we have that left-hand side ready, let's focus on the right-hand side according to our design, where we're going to create a widget where you will pull all the provinces that are available. We're going to do exactly the same approach as on the left hand side, where we're going to be consuming the model, and based on the values that are selected, we're going to render them accordingly. Also, we're going to have one specific checkbox that toggles them all off or on and just shows a label at the top. So why don't we focus on that now? So let's proceed now and create the widget that is going to show on the right hand side, which is the list of the provinces. If we show the design one more time, it's just going to be a list, pretty much like the one on the left hand side, but this one is going to show all the available provinces, and then we also need to manage the ones that are selected. Also, we're going to have a provider that toggles the all provinces on or off, so we want to tackle that piece as well. So why don't we go ahead and do that? So what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to create another widget, and this widget, just like the map assets list, we're going to make it so that it handles the provinces list. So I'm going to call it provinces list. Let's create, again, another stateless widget, and we're going to call it provinces list. It's going to do pretty much the same thing. It's probably going to be a container. It's going to wrap those like the list. It's going to show a title and whatnot. And I want to inject it right into my map right here. In this particular case, the way that it is located, the way that it is placed, is actually on the right hand side. So the map, the all provinces list, it will be aligned at the top right. So here it says top left. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to add the provinces list right here. which I think I want to rename. Let's call it all provinces list, because I don't want it to conflict with the list of provinces that I just created earlier, like the model. So I'm going to call this all provinces list, and then that way this is just the widget, and the other one represents the actual list of models, a model. So I'll do all provinces list, and there it is. And now if I reload it, we should be able, we don't see nothing on the right hand side, but let's add a placeholder. Then I'm going to call it text all provinces. Here it is. If I reload it, then I should be able to see it on the top. Oh, it says still top left. So let me overwrite it. Of course, I need to put it on the top right. Reload, we should be able to see it, and there it is. So now let's continue working off of that location and continue fleshing it out. So going to my all provinces list, I should be able to list, let's say, all the provinces, right? So I'm going to start the same way that I did before. So I'll have a container, right? And then I'm going to add for example, I'm going to add, just like before, I'm going to add like a padding and margin. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to do padding. Let's do the same thing. Edge insets.all 16. And then we're going to copy that and do the margin as well. I'm gonna constrain the width, even though I could make it like a percentage, but right now I'm gonna just also constrain it to like 300 pixels, which is okay. The height I just wanted to occupy the whole height of the page, so I'm not gonna dictate a height. A lot of decoration, of course, because I want that aspect that I told you. I want like a white color in the background. Later, we will override it by the theme and whatnot. We'll add a border radius just like before. So we'll keeping that same status, the same styles. And now my child will be, like I mentioned, remember, an expanded widget. Or actually, no, let's start with a column, because what I want to do is add a text widget as the label. And then that will actually be called just like that. We're going to call it provinces. I will want some spacing in between. So I'll do just add the spacing thing, and then I'll add 16 pixels in between. And because remember, as in the design, I want this provinces label, and then I want the list. But then I want this checkbox at the bottom, but I want the whole list to stretch most of the real estate devoted for that container. So here I'm going to add, of course, an expanded widget. And here's where I'm going to add like a list view builder. For now, let's keep it like that. But then at the bottom of that widget, I want actually a divider. I probably want a divider, and then I want for example, like a checkbox list title and a checkbox list style. I'm gonna add it later, but for example, or if you wanna, actually can just add the placeholder pieces in here. That way, for example, I can do false. Later, we're gonna like flesh it out more fully. Here the title will just be like another text widget, and then it just says the design says all provinces, right? So I'm just gonna add all provinces. That's okay. The provinces, I'm gonna add a style, and then I'm gonna add the text theme that of course I need to install my theme. So I'm gonna do text theme. I'm gonna inherit it from the theme. So I'm like, this is pretty much the default what comes out of the box with Flutter. So I'm gonna do text theme, and then I'm going to add the headline, same thing as before. I'm gonna say headline small, and then I'm going to copy with, because I'm gonna overwrite some properties, and I'm gonna make it bold just like the one that I did before. So by doing that, now I'm gonna save it. Now let's flesh out the builder. So where are we gonna be reading this information from? So I'm gonna be reading remember, I'm going to be reading all available provinces. And for that, I need a ref so I can locate that provider and get all the provinces. So I have to convert this into a consumer widget. And of course, import it from Flutter Riverpod, inject the widget ref. That way I have access to the ref as a widget. And then here I'm going to have final all provinces. And then I'm going to say ref.watch provinces list provider. So this gives me all the list of the original list of provinces, whether they, they're hard coded for now, but they should be coming from an endpoint later. And this is what I'm going to be using as the seed for this list. So remember, I need an item count. So it will be all provinces that length. And the item builder will actually be building this list of let's say all the list of checkboxes that correspond to each one of the provinces. So of course I want to pull the corresponding province. Let's just render them all just to see them. So I'm going to create again, the same thing, a checkbox list tile. The value for now, I'll just put false. But remember, we're going to do the same strategy as we did before. Is it in the selected list of provinces? If not, you show the true or false value. We're going to show the province name because remember, we are rendering the list of provinces that we mocked up and we are feeding into this application and we're feeding into this widget. So let's see what's looking like. So let me reload and bring back. Whoa, we are already cooking. This is now working, but at least I like the way that it came out so fast, so easy. And it was just because of the way that we created our providers. See, it has like scrollable capabilities, which is exactly what I want. Let me do some alignment in here. So in this column, I'm going to say cross alignment.start. And of course, what I want to do now is now that I have all the list of provinces, I want to know which one is clicked, which one is selected. For that, you already guessed it, we need to create another provider. If I already have the list of provinces, like the original list of provinces, I already feeding the mocked provinces. We have the selected map assets. Shouldn't we have a list of selected provinces? So that's exactly what we're going to be building. Remember, you have to think in that way. You create your models, but then you create another model that maybe holds the ones that are selected, because you want to persist like the original list, and then you want to use a list for doing that comparison. So we're going to start by writing the keyword Riverpod. And I'm going to create a class called selected provinces. And then you do follow exactly the same nomenclature, $_ selected provinces. I'm going to get some assistance. And then you see it's going to be, again, a list of provinces. It's going to start empty because it's not going to be selected. We're not persisting that. And when we update, we're going to update it based on like the delta of the original list versus like the ones that are selected by the user. So if I save that, my builder is running. You see that the errors went away. That means a lot of code got generated thanks to the build runner. And now we have something that we can query against. And we already have a very convenient method called update, which will update the status, the internal state of the selected provinces, and will trigger notifications and trigger and broadcast its state in this particular case, so that the widget, the provinces list, rebuilds itself and then shows accurately and with efficiency the current state of that list, whether selected or not, which ones are selected, which ones are not. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's go back to our widget. Let's get rid of this because we don't need it, the all provinces list. So now I'm showing all my provinces list. I'm good with this, but now I need the selected provinces. And then remember, you do a watch on that. We already have our provider generated for us automatically, and good, we got automatically imported. So we have selected provinces provider, which is good. Now you want to render the corresponding value. So you want to call it, value is whether the selected provinces contains the current province in the iteration. And this is the value then that you will feed into your checkbox list tile. Now, in the unchanged event of the checkbox list tile, you're going to tap into that update method that is in the selected provinces provider, and you're going to do it very easily by just remember, you're going to say if value, you're going to update this collection. Remember, you're going to say if value, then add it. Else then just remove it. And then now that you have this updated collection, you're going to overwrite the internal state of the list by reconstructing the list with the updated values. Remember, you're not mutating the list. You're actually like recreating another instance. That way, Riverpod knows that the list changed, and you have unidirectional data flow, you have immutability, and you have one single source of truth. So in this case, I'm going to say ref.read. Of course, I'll say select the provinces notifier dot update, and then you pass the updated list of the provinces because you update it right here as you check. So now I'm going to save it all, and I'm going to reload, and let's see what this is looking like. Now I can click on each one of the provinces, and now it's looking good. Remember, we're not responding to this yet. We're just updating, for example, like the ones that are checked or not. The all provinces is not hooked up yet. We're gonna hook that up in just a minute. But look how cool it is. Now I'm able, see, the values get persisted even when I scroll away from that viewport, and I'm able to check them on or off. And this is again thanks to the power of Riverpod. Now let's hook up the all provinces checkbox, which should be pretty much exactly the same way. So the all provinces checkbox right here, we want to hook it up. This actually is going to be kind of like a freebie. So let me show you how you're actually going to do that. So this is our checkbox list tile. So what do we want this checkbox list tile to do? We want it to listen when all of the checkboxes are checked off. You want it to be off. When all of them are on, you want it to be on, but you also want it to trigger all of the ones above to be checked off or checked on. So let's try that. So how we should do that? The way that you could do, you can either wrap this whole thing into a consumer, or you can just make this a consumer as well. That way it's independent. You can even do it like that. So check this out. So I can just wrap it also inside a consumer. I will, of course, a consumer widget receives the context, the ref, and the child like this. And then now, for example, what you're going to be doing is, okay, so you're going to watch on whether all the provinces are checked in. So for example, you can just say, you know already all the provinces up there, right? So you say all provinces because you already have it up here. You already, you can tap into that. So it's at a global level. So you can say, is the length of all provinces equals to the selected one? Okay, so then you can change it to true, and that way it will select it. So it will either be listened to itself being checked on, or that the list above is actually all of them are checked. So you're checking that all the core list of provinces matches the ones that are of the list of selected provinces. If it matches, then it's going to be true. And in the on change, you're going to do exactly the same thing. So if it's true, then you want to update it with all the provinces, meaning do the actually use the core one, like all the original list, and then you update it, meaning make them all selected. Otherwise, pass an empty list, meaning just clear them all with an empty list, meaning kind of like reset the list. So let's save that. Let's reload. And now let's take a look. So I can check stuff on or off, and I can click on all provinces. They get checked on or off, and then you should be good. You can now check them all off, and then all of them are gone. You see how cool it is, how easy it is to implement, and then you were able to do like these type of capabilities. So I love the way that this is coming out, and you see how cool it was. Like I'm able to just show stuff like that. This is lovely, and you saw how easy and very streamlined it is. So now what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna proceed and show now the provinces that are actually checked on. I want to see them colored on the screen, on the map, as I check those on or off. That way you can see which ones are selected in the map visually, not just on the list. So why don't we try that now? Now that I have the list of provinces all hooked up, I'm able to load them, I'm able to check them on or off. Now I want to be able to consume those values and make the map react accordingly based on which one is selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomize a color as soon as the user just selects one of those. So let's try that. So I'm going to go back now to the map, to the map itself. And remember, right now we're only listening to the selected map assets because we're and just reading all the provinces, but now we want to read all the provinces that are selected. So that is the one that now we want to tap into, right? So we want to say whether the selected provinces, which ones are selected, and then that way we can color them accordingly. So I have all the provinces right here. Now I want to consume the selected provinces, and then I'm going to do just a ref.watch on that list of, selected provinces. So we do the selected provinces provider. That way it gives us that list. So now let's tap into these values and then we're going to color them accordingly. Right now, I'm just going to do something simple. Like see right here in the provinces, I have the, let's say, for example, the current province. I want to do like a final, say province color, and the default will be like transparent. Something like that, right? And then what we want to do is something like this. Actually, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to put something like that. This is, again, also defined from my design. So what I'm going to say is that if the selected, same thing, if the selected provinces contains the province, then I'm going to use this as the default color, right? And then instead of passing this color right here, I'm going to pass that province color. And then province color, if it's selected, I'm going to say province color. Then I'm just going to come up with a color from ARGB. And then I can just do like a random color in here. I came up with something like, 255, for example, passing like the red, and blue. You could do like index +1 times 20. Index +2 times 30, index +3. Let me see, index +3 times 40. Like I just came up with like some weird colors. You can do your own strategy here. But for example, I just want to, and instead I'm going to make it var, of course, because I want to overwrite it. And then after that, I just render the color accordingly, depending on whether it's selected or not. The default will be just this like light yellow color. So let's try that. So yeah, it should be able to listen to all the selected provinces. If it's contained within the selected ones, just return the color and repaint the SVG with that color, and then we should be good. So let's reload it, and then let's see. So right now it looks like that. All of them are unselected, but then let's say if I start selecting, you see like the multiple colors just changing right there. So something like that is, what you want to do. You can do them all or uncheck them all off, and then that way you look them like that. Maybe let's lower the opacity a little bit. I'll just try it like maybe lighter colors. Yeah, something like this could work. And you see, now you see it very reactive. I'm able to control each individual province being selected. And if not, then the default color just shows underneath it. So this is kind of like what you would want in an original scenario. Later, when we implement theming, we will bring it, to more, to its full glory. We'll add a lot more vibrant colors and whatnot, and appropriate colors for every theme. But for now, let's keep it just very simple. You see, when you check on or off, it will look like that. This still works. If you see, it all works perfectly, and this is all again based on how reactive Riverpod is, how quick it is, how fast it is, how dynamic it makes you build Flutter applications. So I love the way that it's coming out. Next thing in line is what we want to do is we want to set up like the regions right below. If you see our design, we're actually determining like different regions. This is actually also going to be driven based on information that we currently have based on the provinces. Like every province belongs to a given region. When someone selects a particular region, then we're going to highlight a range of provinces. Select none, select either the North region, the Southeast region, or the Southwest region. And then, or you can just reset it by hitting none. And then we're going to create this little widget down there. The regions, the provinces overtake the color of the regions, but at least you will see like a different color set up for that. And this is mostly just to show you another type of widget, the radio button widget that you can use to build like other type of widgets. And you see how kind of pretty much looks like the checkbox, and you can use it in a different way. But all of them combined, they can interact with one another, they can share the information and update each other accordingly. So why don't we tackle that widget down there now? So we're going to start by defining the model that will drive that functionality. As you see, we need something like that represents like the multiple regions that we have, plus the none, like a way for us to reset all the regions, right? So we have 3 main regions in the Dominican Republic, and we're going to use that. We're going to use the same approach as before. We're going to create a provider that kind of feeds this widget, right? So we're going to go to the enums. We're going to go to the models folder, the enums, and we're going to be creating an enum called map regions. We have one called southeast and southwest and the north region. So we have all of those regions. Actually, let's just put it in order like this. And then Now, remember what we were mentioning before, that you can create enhanced enumerations. I know for a fact that certain provinces have like a particular property. If I show you before here, every province has a region code. We're going to be leveraging that region code. There are 32 provinces, and then each one of the provinces belong to a particular region. And then here in our payload, every province object has a region code. We're going to use that to actually map it. So I'm going to use it for now because they're permanent. I'm going to be modifying my enum to make it an enhanced enum, and then that way I can tap into that functionality. So I'm going to be creating a final list of string called provinces. So every region has a list of corresponding provinces that they belong to underneath it. So right now, what we're going to do is this. So every region has a collection of provinces. Every province has a number of a set of region codes, right? And they have like sub-regions, but I'm going to just aggregate them all into the main 3 regions. In this particular case, I'm going to be creating an enhanced enum, which will have a list of provinces, of course, and the way that I'm going to set them is like this. So I'm going to create a const constructor into which you pass a list of corresponding region codes, each one of those codes that the provinces carry with. Every province has a region code, so I'm going to add them here. So for example, none means I'm not going to have any region code. North has 4 specific region codes, so I'm going to add 01, 02, 03, and 04. So what this means is for example, the North region, there's a bunch of provinces that have like sub-regions assigned to them, but all of the sub-regions 01, 02, 03, and 04 are part of the North. Same thing for Southeast and Southwest. I'm going to assign corresponding sub-regions to it, like some codes, and then that way, we're able to just assign it like that. So for the Southeast is 5, 6, and 7 only. So I'm just gonna change this to 5, 6, and 7, and then for the Southwest region is 8, 9, and 10. So I'm gonna do 8, 9, and 10. So just like that, we should be able to, let's say, account for all the regions available in in the map. When I select one particular region, all I'm going to do is say, is this particular province belongs to one of these regions, and then is going to change a color accordingly. So why don't we try that? So what I'm going to do now is, as we mentioned, we're going to be creating this widget down here. We're going to be populating this widget, and we're going to call it map regions list. So let's do the same thing. I'm going to go to the widgets folder. I'll create a map regions list widget. And as you see, it's going to be aligned at the bottom of the page. So it will be alignment bottom center. So let's do exactly that. I'm just going to add the placeholder code for now. So I'll do map regions list. I will make it into a material widget, of course. And in my map, I'm going to align it, actually in the page, I'm going to align it at the bottom. So I'm going to do bottom center, and it would be the map regions list. Now everything is located within a stack, and everything is just overlaid and aligned accordingly. In this case, the map regions list is at the bottom center, and now we're fleshed this one out. So just like before, just like in the other ones, I'm gonna do exactly the same approach. I'm gonna create a container. I'm gonna leverage this container. I'm going to, instead of hard coding, I want to add like some padding and margin. Actually, not margin, let's just keep it like that. The width, I'm actually going to be using media query. So I'm going to add media query dot size of context, and then I'm going to make it in proportion to the width of the screen. I'm going to make it half of the screen. So I'm going to use media query size of context dot width divided by 2, and that would be in proportion to whatever the width of the screen is. It will be half of it. Add some decoration. We keep that same decoration. That's okay. Now we want to add a child, and the child of that, instead of being a column, we want to make it into a row. If you see, the layout is actually a horizontal layout, so we want to add a label and some of those radio buttons in there. So I'm going to add all the children of my row. I want to add I don't want to add some spacing in between. I could do it later. But for now, what I want to add first is a text widget, which contains the regions label. And yeah, why don't we add some of the styling? So let me actually start importing the text theme. And then I say theme dot of context text theme. I'm going to do the style as a text theme, that same thing as before, headline small, and I want to make it bold. So I say copy width, and then I want to do font weight bold. I don't need any of these. If you want any arbitrary one, you can still go with the spacing, but I'm gonna do, for example, like okay, let's keep with, you know, spacing of 16. So with the text in place, now I want to create a separate row for my checkboxes. So we're gonna do the same strategy as before. So I'm gonna say list.generate. I'm gonna use what? The core list of regions. So remember, either I use the default list of regions, which is I can for example, I can go up here and I say final regions, map regions, you know, my regions that values as, you know, something that I can you know, just render and make it so that I can generate the list of the regions. So right there, I'm gonna say list generate regions.length. And now, of course, remember, you deconstruct the list. That way you can see all the that way you can see all the regions when they get rendered. So how we want to render each one of those regions? I can use the radial list tile. So I'm going to do radial list tile because we've already used the checkbox list tile. So let's use the radial list tile. And of course, you need to populate title, a group value, unchanged, and whatnot. So the value would be, again, just like before, you're going to check, for example, like the particular region. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say final region, regions index, and that is the value for the radial list tile. The tile will be the name of that region. So in this particular case, I'll say region.name. The group value, what is the group value? The group value will determine whether it is selected or not, right? So what we need to do is, in this particular case, I can provide, I'll null these up just so that it doesn't bark on me. And what I'm gonna do is, now we need to be able to read the list of regions. Where are we gonna read those from? So now that we have the regions, you need to create a provider that feeds these regions to you. Now that we have the core list, which is from this place, like, you know, we have the core list of regions, we want to have something where we have the selected regions. Now you know where I'm going, right? You need to create a provider that holds the list of selected regions. So let's go and do that. So let's go to the providers. And now that we have all the regions available, now we're going to create something called, like, you know, selected region. And we're going to do the same approach. You say Riverpod, you create a class called selected region, right? Because now it's not a list of regions that you're not going to do multiple selection. You're going to do single selection. So we're going to do selected region and extends selected region. It will be a type of map region, of course. And what are you going to return as the default? We're going to return map regions.none, meaning no region will be selected initially. And then when you update it, it's just going to be that single region that gets updated. So you're going to save that. The build runner kicks in. It generates your selected region. And now you should be able to have a selected region provider, which will allow you to listen to the changes on the selected region. And of course, we created a convenient method to mutate the state of the selected region provider. So let's go back now to the map regions list. I need to convert now this to a consumer widget. I am going to inject the widget ref, because this is a widget and this is the way that widgets, that's how they get that reference, you know, pun intended. And now what you do here is you can just say final selected region, and you say ref.watch selected region provider. There should already be one created. And then you just read that one. So you do selected region provider. Now you check whether your selected region is either, for example, like the one that, you know, if it's that one. And then the way that checkboxes work is that the group value is the one that then you assign it to. And then that way, when you render the row of radio buttons, in this particular case, the radio list style, which are type of map region, the three of them will have that selected region, and if it matches the actual value, it will display as the one that is selected. So it will use the value, which is the corresponding value out of the core list of regions, and then the group value. If it matches the value, it will be the one selected. If not, it will be unselected. And of course, as is customary, you in the onChanged, you're going to update the value of that selected region accordingly via the update method that we created, the helper method that we created within that provider. Let's see what it's looking like. So I'm gonna just reload and come back to our application. Let's see what it's looking like. Nothing gets rendered is because you want to, for example, create around the radio list style, because it is a horizontal list, you might want to constrain, let's say, the width of the radio button. The way that I like to do it is I create a constrained box, and I use constraints, and then the box constraints, I'll set it as a max width. So I'm going to give it a max width for now. Let's give it a max width of 180 pixels. That way, because what we were doing is like it was uncontrollably just expanding, right? So in this particular case, let me just show you right here. And of course, it's just because it's getting chopped off. But now you see the regions, one that says none, one that says north, southeast, and southwest. And now this widget is actually responding accordingly based on the selected region. Riverpod is actually maintaining the state correctly. And now we should be able to tap into the selected region from this widget, consume it inside of the map, and then render it accordingly. So why do we do that? Let's go now to the map. So I'm gonna move this a little bit to the side, and now on our map, on the actual map, I'm going to change the color right here, and then I could probably say something like, of course, I need to read, for example, like the selected region here as well. So you want to say final selected region, you want to listen to that as well. So selected region ref.watch selected region provider. Now this widget is also listening for that. So if the selected region, if the provinces inside of this selected region matches the one that I'm currently, let's say I've currently selected, then you could do so. So I'll do else if selected region provinces contains which one? The region code. So I'm going to say province.region code. If it's contained within one of those, then I'm going to say province color equals, let's start with something like, colors.green, for example. We can change it later, but for now, let's see if it's actually working. So I'm going to save all. I'm going to reload, and let's come back to the map. If I can select some of these, this is all good. I can uncheck them all. Or I can say, select only the north, select the southeast, or select the southwest. You see, because those provinces that are actually within the list of provinces within the region that I just selected, I can just change the color programmatically. But now remember, like I told you, you can actually override some of the ones that are in here, because if you see, for example, if you go to some of the other provinces in here, you can the selected province overrides the region. That way it shows on top. You see, that's why we're taking into consideration the province selected or the region selected. And then depending on that, you change, does that if else, right? You can just say none and then they all get cleared and so on and so forth. So if you see here, now we've been able to hook up all the, let's say the functionality from the showing all the map assets, showing all the provinces, showing all the regions. And now we have a very interactive map in just a little bit of time. Now what we're going to be proceeding next with is actually feeding the data. We're going to be asynchronously loading the data either from a mocked service or directly from the API. And that's exactly what we're going to be tackling next. So please stay tuned and check out for the next video. Hey everyone, I'm Roman. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on other Flutter content coming my way. Thank you so much for your support. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media.